The clink of wine glasses echoed against the dim wood of the restaurant walls, laughter from nearby tables filling the air like smoke. Across from me, my wife Rachel smiled that slow, easy smile she reserved for it when she was about to ask for something she already knew I wouldn't want to give. "You ever think about opening things up?" she said casually, swirling the wine in her glass like she was talking about ordering a new side dish. I blinked, my fork covered halfway to my mouth. "Opening what up?" I asked, stupidly. She laughed, light, almost musical, and leaned in slightly. I caught a whiff of her perfume, that soft vanilla and something darker underneath. It stirred a familiar ache low in my gut, an ache I hadn't felt from her in months. "Our marriage," she said, voice smooth as silk. "You know, seeing other people." For a moment, the world went dead silent. Even the laughter around us seemed to vanish, replaced by the dull roar of blood pounding in my ears. I stared at her. My wife. The woman I'd shared a bed, a life, a future with for nearly 8 years. Rachel, with her warm green eyes and that wild auburn hair I used to lose my hands in after long days. Rachel, who used to look at me like I was the only man alive. Now she was suggesting we let strangers between us like it was no bigger deal than picking new curtains. Before I could find words, I caught a movement out of the corner of my eye. Her mother, yes, her mother, sitting 2 tables over with a group of her own friends, exchanged a glance with me. A glance that lasted just a little too long. Her eyes, so similar to Rachel's but sharper somehow, flashed with something I couldn't quite name. Was it pity? Amusement? Regret? I opened my mouth, closed it. Rachel, mistaking my shock for reluctance, rushed ahead. "It's not about not loving you," she said quickly, reaching out to touch my hand, but barely, like even the contact was too intimate now. "It's just, don't you think we've gotten a little stale? Stale. Like a loaf of bread left on the counter too long." That's what I was now. I tried to laugh. I really did. But it came out wrong, jagged, and bitter. Rachel didn't notice. She was already sipping her wine again, her eyes darting around the room like she was looking for the next exciting thing. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. She wore a new black dress, something clingy that molded to her body in ways that made my palms itch. Her lips were darker than usual, painted a shade of deep wine, almost like she'd already dressed herself up for someone else's eyes. God, she looked good tonight. Too good. My chest burned with it, a confusing mix of anger, sadness, and still, unbelievably, desire. I remembered when that look was just for me. She pressed on, oblivious to the war inside me. "It's not just sex, you know," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that made my spine stiffen. "It's about freedom, about feeling alive again." Alive. The way she said it made it clear, whatever life she felt when we touched now wasn't enough. I realized I was still holding my fork, my knuckles gone wide around the handle. I set it down carefully, like if I moved too fast, the whole table might shatter. Rachel tilted her head, waiting, expecting me to agree, maybe even expecting me to thank her for being so progressive. Instead, I forced a smile that felt foreign on my face. "Maybe we should talk about this at home," I said quietly. Rachel shrugged, unfazed. "Sure. Whatever you want, babe." She picked up the dessert menu and scanned it like nothing earth-shattering had just been dropped between us. I barely noticed when the waiter came by. I barely noticed the way Rachel flirted lightly with him, that easy charm she used to save just for me now leaking out into the world for anyone to take. But I noticed her mother again. She wasn't laughing with her friends anymore. She was looking at me, really looking. And this time, I saw it, a flash of something raw, something almost protective. Then she turned away, pretending she hadn't seen me watching. My stomach twisted. Something else was happening here. Something I didn't understand yet. As we left the restaurant, Rachel's hand brushed mine. No real grip, no real pull, just a soft, almost accidental touch, like strangers passing in the night. I looked up at the cold stars, wondering if this was the moment everything started to come undone. Somewhere deep in my gut, I already knew the answer. The door barely clicked shut before Rachel grabbed her keys from the bowl and slung her purse over her shoulder. No words, no kiss goodbye, just a breezy, "Don't wait up." I stood there in the hallway, still in my jacket, feeling like I had just been run over by something I never saw coming. "Where are you going?" I asked, the question breaking the brittle silence. Rachel paused, one foot already out the door. "Just meeting someone." She tossed it over her shoulder like she was talking about a hair appointment. "It's not a big deal. It's what we agreed, right?" We. As if I had ever agreed to anything. Before I could respond, the door closed. I heard the quick staccato click of her heels down the front steps, the slam of her car door, the growl of the engine pulling away into the night. And then, silence. I just stood there. It felt like she'd punched a hole through the middle of the house, and all the air had gone rushing out. I peeled off my jacket, my movements slow and clumsy, and wandered into the kitchen like a ghost. That's when I saw her mother. Elaine was sitting at the counter, one hand wrapped around a half-full glass of red wine. Her posture unnervingly casual for a woman who had just watched her daughter propose, shattering a marriage over tiramisu. She looked up at me with those sharp green eyes, so much like Rachel's, but colder somehow, older, wiser. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her voice low, rough around the edges in a way that made my stomach tighten. I ran a hand through my hair, not even bothering to pretend. "Was that normal to you?" Elaine smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was thin, tight. "No, but nothing about Rachel's been normal lately." She swirled the wine in her glass, the deep red catching the overhead light and glinting like blood. "I tried to talk her out of it," she said. "Tried to tell her she was playing with fire." Her eyes locked on mine. "But you know Rachel. Always had to touch the stove to believe it was hot." I pulled out the chair opposite her and sat down hard. My body felt twice as heavy as normal. "Is this her way of ending it?" Elaine shook her head slowly. "No, she doesn't want to end it." Her voice softened, and for a terrifying second, I thought I saw real sadness there. "She wants it all. You and the excitement of being new to someone else." "And what about me?" I asked, bitter laughter bubbling up in my chest. "I'm just supposed to sit here and what? Pretend like it doesn't destroy me." Elaine leaned forward, her blouse gaping slightly at the neckline, revealing just a hint of skin, distracting in a way I hated myself for noticing. The wine had warmed her cheeks, or maybe it was something else. Either way, she looked less like my wife's mother, and more like something dangerously alive. "You're not built for that," she said quietly. "You're not like her." I opened my mouth to argue, to defend Rachel somehow. It was reflex, muscle memory, but the words died on my tongue. Elaine took a slow sip of wine, her eyes never leaving mine. "You know," she said, almost musingly, "there are ways to make a woman realize what she's about to lose." The air between us shifted, heavier, charged. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, my voice low. She smiled again, that slow, dangerous smile, and set her glass down with a soft clink. "Sometimes the only way to teach someone a lesson," she said, "is to give them a taste of their own medicine." My throat went dry. There was no mistaking the way she was looking at me now, not like her daughter's husband. Like a man, like someone she wanted. And under the weight of that look, something inside me cracked. For months, I'd been chasing scraps of affection from Rachel, humbling myself for a touch, a kiss, a glance. I'd convinced myself that if I just worked harder, loved better, it would fix itself. But here, across the counter, was someone else. Someone who saw me bleeding and didn't flinch away. Someone who wasn't pretending everything was fine. "You're drunk," I said, though my own voice sounded unconvincing even to me. Elaine shrugged one shoulder, a lazy, elegant movement that sent a ripple through the silk of her blouse. "A little," she smiled, tilting her head. "Not enough to lie to you." The kitchen seemed to shrink around us, the shadows stretching longer, the light turning softer. Her perfume, something warm and slightly musky, drifted across the space between us. I hated how aware of her I was suddenly. The curve of her collarbone, the delicate lines at the corners of her mouth, the way her eyes darkened when she looked at me too long. "I should go to bed," I said, standing up too fast. But Elaine didn't move. She just looked at me with that maddening, knowing expression and said, very softly, "Think about it, Michael. If she wants the game, maybe it's time you learned how to play it." I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, every nerve buzzing. Then I turned and left her sitting there, the half-empty wine glass glinting in the dark. But even as I climbed the stairs, I knew I wasn't going to be able to forget the way she looked at me, or how badly, for the first time in a long time, I wanted to be wanted. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel's face, not the woman I married, but the stranger who had kissed me goodbye on our wedding day and then, somehow, years later, decided it wasn't enough anymore. Worse, behind her face, another. Elaine, with that wicked little smile curving her lips, her blouse slipping slightly off her shoulder, her voice low and thick with something more than just wine. I lay there, staring at the cracked ceiling of our bedroom, listening to the clock tick-tick-tick through the hours, trying not to think about what Rachel was doing, who she was doing it with. When I finally dragged myself downstairs sometime past 2 in the morning, the house was dim and heavy with silence. But the faintest pool of light spilled from the kitchen. Elaine was still there. She had kicked off her heels and tucked her legs up under her, curled into the chair like she owned the room. The wine bottle stood empty on the counter next to her, the glass dangling from her fingertips. Her head lifted when she saw me. Her eyes were clear. Sober now, or at least sober enough. You couldn't sleep either, she said. Not a question. I shook my head and sat across from her. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The air between us was heavy, pulsing, thick with the things we weren't saying. Finally, she set her glass down and leaned forward, elbows on the table. You know, she said quietly, it wouldn't take much. I lifted an eyebrow. Much for what? For Rachel to remember what she has, she said, a slight, dangerous smile playing at the corner of her mouth. I laughed, but it came out bitter. She's out right now, screwing someone she met on a fucking app, Elaine. I don't think seeing me sit around pining for her is going to change that. Elaine's gaze sharpened, predatory. That's not what I mean. She leaned even closer, so close that I could smell the wine on her breath and the faint, intoxicating scent of her perfume. Vanilla and sandalwood. Familiar and alien all at once. You want her back? She asked, her voice a husky murmur. You want her to feel what she's throwing away? I hesitated, pulse pounding hard in my throat. What are you suggesting? She smiled wider, and for a second, God help me, I saw a flash of something unmistakable. Hunger. We make her jealous, Elaine said simply, as if proposing we repaint the kitchen instead of burning our lives to the ground. Make her realize she's not the only one who can make moves. I stared at her, heart hammering. You can't be serious. Her fingers, slender, strong, reached out, trailing lightly across the back of my hand where it rested on the table. The touch was electric, sending a jolt straight up my spine. Why not? She murmured. It's just a game. I pulled my hand back, too fast, and she laughed softly, a low, throaty sound that did wicked things to my already frayed self-control. You afraid? She teased. No, I said, too quickly. It's insane. She's your daughter. Her expression didn't change. If anything, it grew sharper, more deliberate. She's an adult. She made her choices. I'm making mine. I sat back in my chair, trying to catch my breath. This was madness. Total, complete madness. And yet, the thought of Rachel, seeing me with someone else, with someone she would never expect, stirred something dark and primal inside me. A flicker of satisfaction. A hunger for revenge, yes, but also something else. Something hotter, dirtier. Elaine must have seen it, because her smile softened, turning almost gentle. Nothing serious, she said, her voice soothing. Just enough to make her think. Enough to make her feel. I swallowed hard. My mind raced through all the ways this could backfire, explode, destroy everything in a way we couldn't fix. But another part of me, the wounded, furious, aching part, wanted it. Wanted her to hurt. Wanted her to wonder if she was about to lose me to someone else. Someone older. Someone smarter. Someone who already knew all of her secrets. Elaine stood slowly, her body unfolding with a grace that was almost feline. She moved around the table and came to stand behind me. I stiffened as she leaned down, her hands resting lightly on my shoulders, her breath warm against my ear. No one has to know, she whispered. Unless we want them to. My body responded before my brain could catch up, a jolt of heat flooding through me, tightening low and hard in my gut. The way she touched me, the way she looked at me, it wasn't tentative. It wasn't innocent. It was deliberate, confident. A woman who knew exactly what she was doing. I tilted my head back slightly, looking up at her. Her eyes were hooded, dark with something dangerous. A spark that needed only the smallest encouragement to catch fire. I swallowed. I need to think. She smiled slow, satisfied, and bent down, pressing a kiss to the side of my neck so light I wasn't sure at first if I imagined it. Think fast, she murmured. Because if we do this, there's no going back. Then she turned and walked away, leaving me sitting there, heart pounding, skin burning, mind spinning. And somewhere deep inside me, a decision had already been made. It started with a text. Not from Rachel. No, she hadn't bothered to check in after her date. It was Elaine. Elaine, tomorrow, 8 p.m. Sully's bar. Dress like you don't care who sees you. I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard, debating whether to even reply. But deep down, I already knew I would go. Because it wasn't just about Rachel anymore. It was about me. It was about not sitting in this damn house alone another night, waiting for the woman I loved to come back smelling like someone else's cologne. It was about reminding myself, and maybe the whole fucking world, that I was still a man. Sully's was a dive, the kind of place that reeked of stale beer, desperation, and bad decisions. A few low-lit booths, a jukebox coughing out old rock songs, and a bar sticky with years of spilled liquor. Exactly the kind of place where Rachel's friends might stumble across us, and exactly the kind of place where no one would dare look too closely. I sat at the bar nursing a whiskey, my nerves a live wire under my skin. Then she walked in. Elaine. Goddamn. She wore a black leather jacket over a slinky red dress that clung to every inch of her in a way that was almost obscene. Her heels clicked softly against the worn floorboards as she moved toward me, hips swaying in a rhythm that pulled every pair of eyes in the room, including mine. My mouth went dry. Her hair was down tonight, soft waves brushing her shoulders, and her lipstick was a deep crimson that matched the heat simmering low in my gut. She smiled when she saw me, not a polite smile. A wolf's smile. A predator spotting prey. She slid onto the bar stool next to me, her thigh brushing mine, not by accident, and leaned in close enough for her perfume to wrap around me, warm and musky and devastating. You clean up well, she said, her voice low. You told me to dress like I didn't care, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She smiled again, slower this time. Looks like you understood the assignment. We ordered another round. Talked about nothing, the music, the bar, the weather, but every word between us thrummed with electricity. A casual brush of her hand against mine. A knee bumping mine under the bar. A low laugh that lingered just a second too long. It was supposed to be staged. It was supposed to be calculated. But it didn't feel staged at all. It felt dangerous. Alive. I caught myself looking at her mouth, full lips that curled up at the corners like she was constantly suppressing a dirty secret. Caught myself remembering the feel of her breath against my neck the night before. And when I looked up, Jesus, she was looking at me the exact same way. The bartender came over, breaking the moment, and that's when Elaine did it. Her hand slid down, resting lightly on my thigh under the bar. Not casual. Not innocent. Her fingers pressed just enough to make it clear. This wasn't a game anymore. My breath caught, heat slamming through me so fast I almost swayed. And right then, of fucking course, the door opened. 3 of Rachel's friends stumbled in, already tipsy, laughing too loudly. Elaine's smile didn't falter. If anything, it sharpened. She leaned closer, her lips brushing my ear, her voice a sinful purr only I could hear. Showtime, sweetheart. My body moved before my brain caught up. I turned toward her, my hand finding her waist, pulling her closer. The curve of her body pressed against mine like we were puzzle pieces snapping into place. Her eyes met mine. No hesitation, no fear, and then she kissed me. It wasn't a soft kiss. It wasn't a careful, tentative thing. It was hungry. Hot. Possessive. She tasted like whiskey and danger and something even sweeter underneath, something forbidden. Her fingers tangled in the back of my hair, her body pressing harder against mine, and I responded instinctively, deepening the kiss, my hand sliding down the curve of her hip, pulling her even closer until there wasn't a breath of space between us. I forgot where I was. Forgot why we were doing this. There was only her mouth on mine, her body against mine, and the sudden, brutal realization that I didn't want this to stop. When we finally broke apart, the bar seemed unnaturally quiet. Rachel's friends were staring, wide-eyed, mouths hanging open. Elaine licked her lips, slow, deliberate, and turned, as if noticing them for the first time. Oh, she said innocently, smoothing her dress down. Hey, girls. The sheer evil glint in her eyes almost made me laugh. Almost. Instead, I grabbed my drink and downed it in one swallow, my hands shaking slightly. Elaine leaned back against the bar, crossing her legs slowly, flashing just enough thigh to make one of Rachel's friends choke on her drink, and shot me a look that was pure sin. Want to get out of here? She asked, voice low enough that only I could hear. It wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't supposed to go any further. But I knew, looking at her, that if I said yes, if I followed her out of this bar, there would be no pretending anymore. No more games. Just 2 people who were way past the point of no return. I should have said no. I should have walked away. Instead, I smiled, a dangerous, reckless smile that felt foreign and thrilling on my face, and tossed a few bills on the bar. Lead the way, I said. And just like that, the last little crack between us shattered wide open. We barely made it to her house. The second Elaine closed the front door behind us, the air between us snapped like a live wire. No pretense now. No pretending. I backed her up against the door without thinking, my hands finding her waist, her hips, the soft dip of her lower back. She grabbed fistfuls of my shirt, yanked me closer, and we were kissing again, but not like at the bar. This wasn't for show. This was real. Her mouth was hotter, hungrier, her nails scraping along the back of my neck as she pulled me down to her. Every second felt electric, charged with months, hell, maybe years, of anger, loneliness, and unspoken need. God, Michael, she gasped between kisses, her voice rough and broken. What are we doing? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mouth found the curve of her throat, tasting her skin, my hands sliding down over the swell of her hips. The dress she wore was too tight, too damn tempting, and when I found the zipper and dragged it down, she let out a low, shaky breath that almost undid me. The fabric slid down her body, pooling around her feet like a pool of blood-red silk. And underneath, God help me, black lace. Tiny, delicate scraps of it clinging to her curves. She was stunning, no, devastating, and for one insane, breathless moment, I forgot everything else. Forgot Rachel. Forgot the plan. Forgot that there was no coming back from this. Elaine's fingers fumbled at the buttons of my shirt, her touch growing more frantic with every second. I should have stopped her. Should have stepped back. But when she pushed my shirt off my shoulders and her hands slid over my bare chest, all I could do was groan and pull her harder against me. We stumbled down the hallway, knocking into the walls, laughing breathlessly between frantic kisses. It was messy, urgent. Years of regret and betrayal and longing, all crashing down in one unstoppable wave. When we finally reached the bedroom, I pushed her down onto the bed, my body following hers instinctively. Her hair fanned out across the pillows, her lips swollen from our kisses, her eyes dark and wild. She looked nothing like Rachel in that moment. She looked like freedom, like revenge, like salvation. I hovered over her, breathing hard, searching her face for any hesitation, any sign that this was too much. There was none. Only raw, naked hunger. Are you sure? I managed, my voice shaking with the effort it took to hold back. Elaine reached up, cradled my face between her hands, and whispered, I'm so tired of pretending. And then there were no more words. Just skin against skin, breath against breath. I kissed a trail down her collarbone, across the swell of her breasts, tracing the delicate lace with my tongue, savoring every soft gasp, every arch of her body beneath mine. Her nails raked down my back, sending shivers through me, dragging me closer, deeper. When I slid the last barrier of lace down her thighs, she opened for me without hesitation, her body trembling with anticipation. I paused for half a heartbeat, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might rip out of my chest. This was it, the point of no return. One more second, and I would be inside her. Inside Elaine, my wife's mother. And still, God help me, I wanted it more than I had wanted anything in years. She lifted her hips in invitation, her hands gripping my shoulders, dragging me into her orbit until there was no space left between us. And when I pushed into her, slow and deep, a broken sound tore from her throat, half moan, half sob. It wasn't rough. It wasn't angry. It was slow, hungry, deep, acclaiming. Our bodies moved together like they had always belonged this way, like the guilt and betrayal burning through my blood couldn't touch the way she clung to me, gasping my name like a prayer. We lost track of time. There was only her breath against my ear, her body tightening around mine, the sharp sting of her nails in my skin as we drove each other higher and higher, chasing the edge. When it finally broke, when she cried out and I followed her over the cliff, it wasn't just orgasm. It was something else. Something messy, raw, shattering. I collapsed beside her, both of us panting, slick with sweat and shame, and something that still tasted too much like victory. The silence afterward was suffocating. Elaine rolled onto her side, her fingers tracing lazy circles on my chest. Neither of us spoke. What could we even say? We hadn't just crossed the line. We'd blown it to hell. And now there was no pretending this had been about Rachel anymore. There was no lesson here. No clever revenge. There was just us, naked, wrecked, and tangled together in a way we could never untangle again. I stared up at the cracked ceiling, the weight of what we'd done settling heavy on my chest. And yet, when I turned my head and looked at her, really looked at her, hair mussed, lips bruised, eyes still dark with satisfaction, all I could think was, I want more. The next morning felt like a dream. A filthy, dangerous dream I should have woken from but didn't want to. I woke tangled in Elaine's sheets, her body pressed against mine, her leg thrown possessively over my hip. The air was thick with the scent of sex and sweat and something darker, regret, maybe, or the quiet knowledge that we had just destroyed whatever thin line of decency was left between us. She stirred when I moved, her hand sliding absently down my stomach, fingers trailing dangerously low before she caught herself and pulled away with a sleepy smile. "Morning," she said, her voice rough and deliciously wrecked. I should have been ashamed. I should have bolted out of that bed and never looked back. Instead, I kissed her again, slow, lingering, before finally dragging myself up and pulling on my jeans. Reality was clawing its way back in, and reality was named Rachel. Elaine watched me dress without a word, her green eyes unreadable. When I finally turned to leave, she caught my wrist. "Be careful," she murmured, her thumb brushing over my knuckles. There was weight in those two words. A warning. And a promise. Rachel came home late that afternoon. I was sitting on the couch pretending to scroll through my phone, my heart hammering hard enough that it rattled my ribs. The door swung open and she breezed in, looking flushed and off. Her makeup was smudged, her hair a little too messy to be an accident. She smelled like cheap cologne and guilt. "Hey," she said, setting her purse down like nothing was wrong. "How was your night?" I stared at her, the anger and bitterness roiling just under the surface. How was my night? It was sweat and moans and betrayal so raw it still ached under my skin. "Quiet," I said, voice flat. Rachel didn't meet my eyes. She wandered into the kitchen, pretending to busy herself with the mail. A beat of silence. "You?" I asked, because some sick part of me wanted to hear her lie to my face. She hesitated. "Barely," then shrugged. "Fun," she said, voice too bright. "Met some cool people. Had a few drinks. Nothing crazy. Nothing crazy." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I stood, shoving my phone into my pocket. "I'm gonna go for a run," I said. Rachel finally looked at me then, really looked, and something flickered across her face. Surprise. Unease. Like she was noticing something for the first time. Maybe it was the way I wasn't clinging, wasn't begging for her attention. Maybe it was the way my body moved, still loose and heavy with the afterglow of everything I'd done with Elaine. Or maybe it was something deeper. A part of me that had snapped off and was never coming back. She watched me lace up my shoes, frowning slightly, and I could almost see the gears turning in her head. This wasn't the husband she remembered. This was someone else. Someone dangerous. "Michael," she said slowly, "are you okay?" I looked up, locking eyes with her. "I'm great," I said, and smiled, a smile that wasn't really a smile at all. Rachel's mouth opened like she was about to say something else, but then her phone buzzed on the counter. She grabbed it like a lifeline, glancing down at the screen. I didn't miss the way she stiffened, or the way she turned slightly, shielding the screen from me. Something sharp twisted in my gut. A flash of fury. Not just at her, but at myself, too. Because no matter how many lines I crossed with Elaine, part of me still hated that I cared so much about what Rachel was doing. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Rachel called after me, "You're acting weird." I paused, hand on the doorknob, and tossed the words over my shoulder without looking back. "Maybe you're just noticing." That night, Elaine texted. "Elaine, she saw us." Or someone did. The whispers have started. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. It had been less than 24 hours, and already the cracks were forming. Rachel was suspicious. Her friends were gossiping. The careful, hidden world we had built, or thought we had, was already crumbling. And the worst part? I didn't feel panic. I felt a rush. A twisted, electric thrill that made my skin prickle and my blood sing. Rachel, who had once held my heart like a fragile, sacred thing, was now just another player in a game that was slipping out of control. And Elaine. Elaine wasn't pretending anymore. She was a flame I should have run from. But all I wanted was to get burned again. It was a Tuesday night when the dam finally cracked. I had just gotten home from work, tie loosened, the weight of the day pressing down on my shoulders. Rachel was already in the living room, pacing, a glass of wine in one hand, her phone in the other. The second I walked through the door, I felt it. The tension was a living thing, coiled and ready to snap. She turned when she heard me, her face flushed with something that wasn't quite anger, but wasn't far from it either. "We need to talk," she said, her voice shaking slightly. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door, feeling strangely calm. "Okay." Rachel set the wine glass down a little too hard, the sharp clink loud in the thick silence. She crossed her arms over her chest, defensive, uncertain. "I know something's going on," she said. I raised an eyebrow. About. Her nostrils flared. Don't play dumb, Michael. You've been different, distant, and people are talking. I leaned against the wall, folding my arms casually across my chest, every muscle in my body tight with anticipation. What are they saying? I asked. Rachel hesitated. Then, quietly, almost like she didn't want to believe it herself. That you're seeing someone. The words hung there, thick and heavy, between us. I didn't deny it. I didn't rush to explain or soothe her ego. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw the first real flicker of fear in her eyes. She wasn't used to this. She was used to me chasing her, forgiving her, fighting for scraps of her affection. But not anymore. Now I was the mystery. Now I was the one slipping through her fingers. Well? She demanded, voice rising, the flush in her cheeks deepening into something almost desperate. Are you? Behind her, I caught movement, and my heart stuttered. Elaine stood in the doorway to the dining room, half shadowed by the dim light. She must have let herself in through the back, like she had so many times before. She said nothing, just stood there, watching, waiting. Rachel didn't notice. She was too busy glaring at me, her body vibrating with a mixture of anger and panic. Is there someone else? She snapped. For a second, I thought about telling her the truth. About tearing down the last flimsy walls between us. About watching her crumble under the weight of her own hypocrisy. But instead, I smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that made her flinch slightly. Does it matter? I asked, voice low and rough. Rachel's mouth opened, then closed again. She looked lost, cornered, and maybe, for the first time, she understood what real betrayal tasted like. Behind her, Elaine shifted slightly, stepping further into the room. Our eyes met, mine and Elaine's, and something unspoken passed between us. A current, a secret, a confession. Rachel followed my gaze and turned, and for a breathless second, I thought it was over. That she would see Elaine. That she would put it all together. But she didn't. She just saw her mother standing there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Nothing unusual. Nothing suspicious. Just family. Rachel let out a shaky breath and turned back to me, her bravado crumbling. Is it serious? She asked, her voice cracking. I almost laughed at the irony. Serious? Was fucking her mother serious enough for her? Instead, I shrugged. Maybe, I said. Rachel stared at me for a long moment, and I saw it, the realization dawning. Not the whole truth, but enough to terrify her. Enough to make her understand that she was no longer the one in control. She swayed slightly, reaching for the back of the couch like she needed something to hold on to. Michael, she whispered. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I needed. I thought we. She trailed off, eyes glossy with tears she was too proud to shed. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. After a long, heavy silence, Rachel turned and fled upstairs, her bare feet pounding against the wood like a retreating army. The house went still. I stood there, heart thudding, breath ragged, feeling more alone than I ever had, and more alive than I had in years. Elaine moved toward me, slow and deliberate, her heels silent against the hardwood floor. When she reached me, she didn't speak. She just placed her hand lightly on my chest, feeling the rapid beat of my heart under her palm. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew. We had passed the point of no return. This wasn't about teaching Rachel a lesson anymore. This was about us. About the hunger we couldn't unfeel. About the fire we couldn't put out. Elaine's fingers curled in the fabric of my shirt, and for one reckless moment, I thought she might pull me upstairs, into another bed that didn't belong to us. But instead, she just whispered, "Be ready." Then she turned and left the house, her perfume lingering in the air long after she was gone. And I was left standing there, trembling, aching, burning, with the ruins of my marriage crashing down around me. The house was silent for 3 days after that night. Rachel barely spoke to me. I barely looked at her. We moved like strangers, orbiting each other in stiff, brittle silence, the air between us heavy with all the things we weren't saying. She knew. Maybe not everything. Maybe not the worst part. But enough. I caught her watching me sometimes, late at night, when she thought I wasn't paying attention, her green eyes dark with suspicion and regret. Too little, too late. By the third night, the walls felt like they were closing in. So when Elaine texted, simple, direct, "Come over," I didn't think. I just grabbed my jacket and left. Her house was dark except for a single lamp burning in the living room. She was standing by the window when I arrived, her silhouette framed by the streetlight outside. a glass of whiskey dangling loosely from her hand. She didn't speak when she let me in. Just watched me with those sharp, knowing eyes. I closed the door behind me, the soft click loud in the stillness. Neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. And then, without a word, she crossed the room and kissed me. It wasn't frantic like before. It wasn't desperate. It was slow, controlled, acclaiming. Her mouth was warm and firm against mine, her fingers threading into my hair, pulling me closer. And I let her. Because I wanted it. God help me, I needed it. When we finally broke apart, I rested my forehead against hers, both of us breathing hard. "This has to stop," she whispered. Her voice was steady, but her hands were trembling against my chest. I closed my eyes. I knew she was right. We had crossed every line there was to cross. There was no way to untangle this, no way to come out clean. It would wreck us. It would wreck everything. And still, I couldn't let her go. Elaine pulled back slightly, searching my face with something like fear in her eyes. "If we keep going," she said, voice breaking, "there's no fixing it. No coming back." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth in her. This wasn't about Rachel anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. This was about us. About something deeper, hotter, more dangerous than anything I'd ever felt before. I cupped her face in my hands, brushing my thumb along her jaw. "I don't want to fix it," I said softly. Her breath hitched. For a moment, she just stared at me, like she was waiting for me to take it back. When I didn't, a single tear slid down her cheek, and then she kissed me again, harder this time, her body pressing into mine with a need so raw it shredded what little was left of my control. We didn't make it to the bedroom. We didn't even make it to the couch. I pushed her back against the wall, her dress riding up her thighs as she wrapped her legs around my waist, pulling me closer, closer, until there was no space left between us. Her mouth was hot against my neck, her fingers frantic as they tore at my belt, my zipper, desperate to have me. When I finally slid into her, it wasn't careful. It wasn't sweet. It was brutal and hot and real, the kind of need that burned down everything in its path. She moaned against my mouth, nails digging into my shoulders, and I drove into her harder, faster, until we were both trembling, gasping, clinging to each other like drowning men to driftwood. There was no pretending, no guilt, only the frantic, reckless pleasure of being exactly where we weren't supposed to be. When it ended, when we both collapsed against the wall, sweating and shaking, she rested her forehead against my shoulder, breathing hard. "I'm scared," she whispered. I closed my eyes, feeling her heart pounding against mine. "Me too," I said, because we both knew, that this wasn't revenge anymore. This wasn't about teaching Rachel a lesson or making her jealous. This was something else entirely. Something deeper. Something real. And real was dangerous. Real could destroy us. But even as the fear gnawed at the edges of my mind, I couldn't find it in me to regret a single thing. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I felt alive. It happened faster than either of us expected. A single careless mistake. That's all it took. Elaine and I had gotten sloppy. Maybe we were too sure of ourselves, too drunk on the secret fire between us to notice the smoke curling toward the ceiling. Maybe, deep down, a part of us wanted it to happen. Wanted the world to finally see what we had done. It was a Sunday afternoon. Rachel had gone out, or so we thought, some vague excuse about meeting a friend for coffee. Elaine texted me 2 hours after she left. "Elaine, come over. Now. I need you." The words punched through my chest. I didn't even hesitate. I didn't think about locks, about parking, about windows that could see too much. I just went. When I walked through Elaine's door, she was waiting. No small talk. No pretending. She grabbed me by the shirt the second I stepped inside, pulled me against her, and kissed me hard, open-mouthed, hungry, desperate. My hands slid up her body, tangling in her hair, feeling her melt against me like she was made for this, for me. We didn't even make it to the bedroom this time. I had her pinned against the wall, her dress hiked up around her hips, panties shoved aside, her legs wrapped around my waist. She was gasping against my ear, nails clawing at my back. I was inside her, thrusting deep and slow, and it was perfect. A perfect, filthy world that belonged only to us. And then, the door slammed. Rachel's voice. High, sharp, horrified. "What the fuck?" Time froze. Elaine's body stiffened under mine. My heart stopped beating. Slowly, so fucking slowly, I turned my head. Rachel stood there, halfway into the living room, her face white as a sheet, her mouth open in a silent scream. Her hands were shaking. Her purse dropped from her fingers, hitting the hardwood with a dull, sickening thud. For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. No one breathed. The truth wasn't whispered or suspected anymore. It was right there, inches from her. Naked, sweaty, undeniable. Elaine slid down from me, smoothing her dress down with trembling hands, her face crumpling in horror and regret and something else, something almost like relief. Rachel's eyes locked onto mine. And what I saw there, it wasn't just betrayal. It was annihilation. You, she rasped, her voice breaking. You and her. I tried to speak, tried to say something, anything, but no words would come. What was there to say? That it just happened? That it wasn't supposed to mean anything? Lies. All of it. It meant everything. Rachel backed up a step, one hand covering her mouth like she was going to be sick. Elaine moved toward her instinctively, mother before anything else, but Rachel flinched away like she'd been burned. Don't, Rachel said, her voice cracking. Don't you dare touch me. Elaine froze, tears brimming in her eyes. Rachel shook her head, laughing, a horrible, broken sound. My husband, she whispered. My fucking husband. And then she turned to me, her face crumbling under the weight of it all. You were supposed to be different, she said. You were supposed to love me. I opened my mouth, the apology on the tip of my tongue. But it tasted bitter. Worthless. Because the truth was, I didn't love her anymore. Not like that. Not the way she wanted. Maybe I hadn't for a long time. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, her whole body trembling with rage and grief. You're both dead to me, she said, her voice raw and trembling. And then she ran out the door, down the steps, into the car, and peeled away, tires screaming against asphalt. The silence afterward was deafening. Elaine collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I just stood there, frozen, broken, watching the last remnants of my old life burn to ash around me. No more marriage. No more pretending. Just the wreckage. And somewhere under the shock and the guilt, buried so deep I almost didn't recognize it. Relief. The secret was out. The fire had finally burned everything down, and now there was nothing left to hide behind. Only the ruins we'd made together. It's been 7 months since that day. 7 months since Rachel stood in Elaine's living room and watched her whole world collapse. 7 months since the last time I heard her voice. The divorce papers came quick and vicious, like a final knife between the ribs. No apologies. No second chances. Just signatures, cold and clean and final. She didn't even want to meet in person. Didn't want to hear my excuses. Didn't want to listen to anything I had to say. And honestly, I didn't blame her. I moved out 2 weeks later. Found a tiny one-bedroom apartment across town, the kind of place where the walls are thin, the floor creaks, and the furniture is whatever I could fit in the back of my truck. It's not much, but it's mine. Elaine and I didn't speak for a long time after the explosion. Not because we didn't want to, but because we were both too scorched to reach for each other. There were days I thought I'd never see her again. Nights when the loneliness gnawed so deep it felt like it would hollow me out completely. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'd wake up reaching for her, the empty sheets cold under my hand. Other times, I'd catch myself staring at the door, half expecting her to just walk through it, wild-eyed and reckless, the way she always was with me. But she never came. Not for a long, long time. Tonight, the knock at my door is soft, tentative. For a second, I think I'm imagining it. Then it comes again, a little louder this time. I swing my legs off the couch, heart thudding against my ribs as I cross the room. When I open the door, she's standing there. Elaine. Same green eyes. Same messy, wild hair. Wearing a black coat against the cold and a tight, reckless smile that hits me like a punch to the gut. She looks different somehow. Older. Tired. But still so fucking beautiful it hurts to breathe. Hi, she says, voice rough. I just stare at her, words stuck somewhere deep in my chest. She shifts her weight from one foot to the other, looking suddenly unsure for maybe the first time since I've known her. I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me, she says quietly. For a second, all I can think about are the ruins we left behind. Rachel, the marriage, the family that will never be the same. But then I see the way Elaine's fingers are trembling slightly at her sides. And I realize, we're both still standing. Somehow, after everything. I step back without a word, holding the door open wider. She hesitates only a second before stepping inside, shrugging off her coat, her eyes never leaving mine. The second the door closes behind her, the tension snaps like a rubber band pulled too tight for too long. And then she's in my arms, kissing me, clutching me like I'm the only solid thing left in a world that's still burning. I kiss her back, hard, desperate, because there's nothing else left to do. Because she's mine now. And maybe she always was. Later, lying tangled together in the half-light of my shitty little apartment, she traces slow circles on my chest with her fingertip. "I'm not sorry," she whispers. I tilt my head to look at her. Me either. Silence stretches between us, warm and heavy. "I don't know what happens now," she says after a while, voice trembling. "I don't know if this can ever be normal." I pull her closer, resting my chin on top of her head. "Maybe it's not supposed to be normal," I murmur. "Maybe it's just supposed to be real." She smiles against my chest, a small, broken smile that feels more beautiful than anything I've ever seen. If you're looking for a happy ending, I'm not sure you'll find it here. There are no perfect pictures. No neat bows tied around the wreckage we made. Rachel will probably never forgive either of us. Her family will probably never speak to me again. There are days when the guilt still wakes me up gasping, sweat-soaked and shaking. But there are also days, quiet, fragile days, when I catch Elaine looking at me with something like hope in her eyes. And for now, that's enough. For now, we're enough. Two broken people. One reckless, impossible love. Still standing. Still fighting. Still burning.